Monday, April 22nd, is Earth Day, and this is an annual celebration that's been taking place in North America since 1969. That was the first Earth Day in San Francisco. It really gathered momentum in 1970. And Earth Day is the holiday for the environmentalists. It's not an official holiday in terms of having a day off work, but it's a celebration of the planet. And so in Vancouver, there are always lots of activities, and at the Georgia Strait, we try to highlight Earth Day and some of the major environmental issues. Earth Day is also often what happens is you'll see a lot of the young people will be having a protest or a march or a celebration in East Vancouver. And so this year for Earth Day, we had several stories in our paper. One of them focused on shrimp, and this is imported shrimp, often in the plastic bags that's frozen, and it's farmed. This is farmed imported shrimp, often from places like Vietnam or Thailand. And one of the concerns is that the shrimp you're receiving that's imported and in these frozen bags, they may have a lot of antibiotics and pesticides are used in the production of this type of seafood. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency is the organization that checks for food, and they look at a certain percentage of it, but they don't look at all of it. And so some of the people in the medical community and out at UBC are concerned about the toxins from these pesticides and antibiotics and how safe this food is to eat. So Gail Johnson, who's our primary health reporter, wrote a big feature story that was on the cover of the Georgia Strait about the farmed imported shrimp, and much of it from Southeast Asia. Another story we focused on was mining in Africa, and these are Canadian companies. Canada is one of the biggest mining countries in the world in terms of the amount of major companies that come out of Canada, and a lot of them are active in Africa, and some of them are engaged in employing a lot of people and promoting economic development, but there's also concerns about human rights, and in some instances there have been skirmishes and even deaths around the mines. So Travis Lupik, who's one of our reporters, wrote a big feature story about that. Travis had lived in Africa for the past year. He was living in Malawi, which is a small country in East Africa, possibly most famous because Madonna adopted her child from Malawi, but also he lived in Liberia, which is in West Africa, and Sierra Leone, which is next door in West Africa. So Travis Lupik has a lot of experience in reporting on issues related to Africa, and in this case, he took a look at Canadian mining companies that are active there. I actually wrote a book review of a book by Paul Watson, who's one of the most famous environmentalists in the world. And Paul Watson is, he created this organization called the Sea Shepherd Society, and what it tries to do is protect the whales and protect the dolphins. And he calls himself a pirate. And what he likes to do is go out in his ship with his crew out on the ocean, and he actually harasses Japanese whaling vessels. So the Japanese will go into the Antarctica to hunt whales. They say it's for research purposes. Paul Watson declares that this is illegal whaling, and he tries to stop the whales. And his book, there's all sorts of mentions about how half the Icelandic whaling fleet was sunk while it was in dock in 1986. There were other whaling ships that were sunk. So Paul Watson tells this story. Some people really have a problem with Paul Watson, and they say, well, he's a pirate, he's a criminal. He doesn't worry too much about these allegations, because he says he's not working for people, he's working for the marine life. And his biggest concern is that we're taking all the fish out of the ocean, and what the consequences of that is, it's going to have serious effects in terms of life on Earth. So he feels he's fighting for the planet. He's got a lot of admirers, but there's also lots of people who disagree with his tactics, including Greenpeace. And the irony is, Paul Watson was one of the early members of Greenpeace, which is one of the world's largest environmental organizations. It started here in Vancouver, and Paul would board the ships, and he would go to He'd go to Newfoundland and stop the seal hunt, and eventually there was Greenpeace International formed. But Paul Watson is now a very strong critic of Greenpeace, and Greenpeace is a very strong critic of Paul Watson.